Thank you all so much. Thank you for that nice introduction, and it's an honor to be here with all of you, and especially at this special time as we celebrate Mother's Day, or Mother Earth. I like to think of the reason that we celebrate such a special day. But what I'd like to do tonight is share the story of my journey along the Red Road and how that began. As Richard said, I am a pipe carrier and I am a sun dancer, and I should explain that a little bit. These are sacred Lakota rites. The Lakota pipe is what in media is commonly referred to as the peace pipe. And I think that's because when people smoke the pipe with you, they feel this overwhelming sense of love and peace and oneness with the earth. And I think that's really the better reason why it's called the peace pipe. Now, as a sun dancer, that's one of the 7 sacred ceremonies that were given the Lakota people about 2,000 years ago when White Buffalo Calf Pipe Woman came and bought them the sacred pipe. And this is one of the most sacred of the Lakota ceremonies. And the Sundance, we were invited to Sundance by a special dream. And in this, after this special dream, then we do Vision Quest, and then we will go, I Sundance up on Pine Ridge Reservation with the Oglala Lakota. My Sundance chief is the chief of the Oglala people, the Lakota people, Mike Littleboy, or Wakia Shnamani One. When they went onto the reservation, they had to take Christian names, and so that's how he came to have the Mike Littleboy. But in Lakota, his name is Wakia Shnamani One, which means the sound of distant thunder. And in the Sundance, as I said, we would prepare for the Sundance, first of all, by doing Vision Quest. And you probably all heard of Vision Questing. Vision Questing is where we go into a sweat lodge to cleanse ourselves, and we make a pledge to Great Spirit. For however many days we feel called to cry for our vision. We call it crying for a vision. And so generally it's about 3 days. And so after you've been cleansed and all of the things that go on the mountain with you are cleansed, you go on to the high mountain point and you fast. You go without food, without water. And then you are in constant prayer with your sacred pipe. And you walk while you pray. We call the native cross, that equal cross. And you're asking Great Spirit to have pity on you and to send you a vision. And what this vision does is it guides your work on this earth walk. Because we're all here to grow spiritually. That's Lakota teaching. We're all here to become a better person. And so on my first Vision Quest, I was very blessed and had Wolf come to me. Now, part of this understanding of the oneness with all of nature and with Mother Earth is to get over that fear. But also, in Lakota way, we say that there is an energy of Creator that's toll. We think of everything as energy. And the Earth vibrates with a very high frequency. I think scientists say it's 11.4 hertz. Now, us two-legged, as human beings, we only vibrate about 5.7 hertz. So it's a much higher vibration. And so when we're crying for our vision, when we're doing our ceremonies, we do them barefoot so that we pick up this energy through our feet. Or other ceremonies, we'll sit on the earth so that we're picking up this energy. And what I love about Lakota way, about these ways, is that it's very congruent with what modern physics is teaching us now. You know, for 2,000 years, we've known everything is energy. The elders have known this, and they practice this. And it's all about vibration and coming into harmony with that and going to the highest energy level we can. And now science is understanding that, and modern physics. Now on a subatomic level, we know that everything is energy. And everything is vibrating. So this is what we're trying to do when we're crying for vision. And through the Vision Quest, Great Spirit's going to send us our helper from the natural world. It's going to be revealed to us. And sometimes that's a tree. Maybe it's a star. Maybe it's a cloud. Maybe it's an ant. Maybe it's a grasshopper. And in my case, it was Wolf. And Wolf, each of these helpers has a special energy that comes with it. Wolf is messenger. For the people, when they were encamped or out hunting, and they heard the wolf, they knew the buffalo herd was nearby, they knew the elk herd was nearby. If wolf set up a ruckus, they knew maybe danger or an enemy was approaching. So wolf is messenger, which is very appropriate because I'm an author, I'm a teacher, I'm a historian, as well as in the sacred work that I do as sun dancer and pipe carrier. Now, I grew up in New Mexico, on the middle of nowhere, on a ranch I had 6 brothers and 2 sisters. We were a large family. And we went through a hard time. We had a period, about 4 years, that were very tough. I don't know how my parents pulled through it all. We lost one home to flood. We barely got out. That was our home down by Isleta Pueblo. We got out just before the floodwaters came and took everything. And all of us children were farmed out into foster homes. So I lived the next 2 years in a foster home. I didn't know I'd ever see my family again. Then once we were all reunited and back together, then the new home we had just built burned down. We lost that home to fire. And then after coming back together again and starting the rebuilding and getting that, then my mother got a brain tumor and died a year later. So it was just boom, 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 boom. And I was raised as a Catholic, and when I went to school the day after my mother died, one of the nuns took me aside and said, "You poor dear," she says, "your family must be so wicked for God to punish you these ways." You know, which is just the thing you tell a little kid that's had all these traumas in their life, and their mother has passed. And, oh, good heavens, you didn't dare talk back. But she was a good teacher because it made me think, and it made me start searching and questioning. And in Lakota way, we have respect for all ways of talking to Great Spirit. We feel that there's one God, one Creator, but there's many ways of speaking to the Great Spirit. So we have respect for all of these, what we call different languages, these spiritual languages. So in my search, I went through all of the different religions, trying to find. Now, my friends that I grew up with down in New Mexico, most of them were Native American. New Mexico is a very cosmopolitan. You know, I grew up thinking whites were a minority. You know, so, sort of tells you where we were. So I knew about the Native American ways. In fact, my brothers and I, we hunted for our food. Excuse me. So I've been carrying a gun since I was 10 years old and had to use it and hunt for food. And when you're killing an animal, it's very traumatic. It's hard to take a life, even when it's to feed yourself. And so we had an old Hopi man that would hunt with us on my aunt's ranch. And one time he came up just as I had killed my deer, and I was dressing it out, and I hadn't quite started to dress it out yet. And he says, "Here," he says, "do this." And so he showed me how to thank the spirit of that deer and to put tobacco in its mouth and thank it for giving its life to feed my family and making life possible. And that was a huge aha moment for me. It was transformative. And from there on, anytime I had to make a kill, it was a sacred moment. It's a whole transformation. And that's a very important lesson that I received on the Red Road. But still at that time, everybody would say, no, these are not for white people. You know, the Native peoples had suffered so much, endured so much discrimination. No, this is not for white people. In fact, any Native ceremony was a federal crime from 1884 until 1978. It's a federal crime, and you went to federal prison for smoking the pipe, doing a vision quest, doing a sweat lodge. A lot of people don't know about the religious persecution that our indigenous people have endured. I went to College of Santa Fe. Most of my classmates were from the Pueblos, and they taught me more than I learned in school, and I kept begging them, "Please, won't you share this with all of us?" No, this is not for white people. So my husband and I, when we retired, we bought a ranch out west of here. We're about a mile west of Florissant. And right about that time, Great Spirit had pity on me and sent a Lakota man who became my teacher and taught me the ways of the sacred pipe and all the ceremonies, and insisted that as a woman, now it was time to step up and to lead ceremony. So I began walking the Red Road at that time, and I was like someone who had been starving to death and finally was allowed to eat. I was so thankful. My spirit now, all the questions were answered. I was being nurtured. My spirit was being nourished. And around that same time, too, I had written a history of the region because I found the history of the Pikes Peak area so fascinating. So I sent my book, my manuscript, off to be reviewed, and I sent it to the Ute Nation for them to review, and that I had written was appropriate and correct. And the Northern Ute people, who now live in Utah, on the Uinta Array Reservation, they assigned a cultural liaison named Clifford Duncan to work with me. So we worked through the mails, through the phone for about 6 months. And then I had also written a book on Native American spirituality, which I sent to him. And after I sent that to him, he called me up one day and he says, Great Spirit says I have to come and meet you face to face. And so I said, oh, that's great. And he said, I'll be down in a couple of weeks. Well, right after he told me that, we started having these 6 magnificent trophy bull elk in our pasture each morning, each day. And they would just bed down right by the corral and let Harold go out and walk among them when he fed the other livestock. They act in a very strange way. So when Clifford finally came a couple of weeks later, he came late one afternoon and I invited him in. We're sitting in the kitchen getting acquainted. And I said, he started telling me then about his mother and his father and his grandmother and grandfather all being medicine people. Well, I knew enough about the Ute culture that I'm talking to a medicine man. So in the appropriate way, what you do is you present tobacco. So I ran, got some tobacco, and I presented it to Clifford. And as soon as I did that, and he understood that I respected the ways, he started telling me in depth more about his medicine work. And in the course of this, then he told me that elk was one of his principal spiritual helpers. Now, elk has a very special energy, a wonderful energy. Elk is the messenger of unconditional love, the teacher of unconditional love. And so I told Clifford about these trophy elk, and he was quite impressed that had been coming to the ranch. So next morning I came down, and Harold had the wood stove roaring and had my cup of coffee, and I went, and there's those 6 trophy elk right there in the pasture. So as soon as Clifford comes downstairs, Harold gave him his cup of coffee, and Clifford came and stood side by side. And the moment that we were standing side by side, those elk got into like a military formation and walked directly straight toward us until they were about, and I got goosebumps just like I'm getting right now every time I talk about, which we call Wochangi. And they came up to right from me to the door, about that close. And as soon as they got there, then they stopped. And just as the sun was coming up, they all raised their heads, and those antlers were framed by the rising sun, and it was just incredible. And there was so much Wochangi, the goosebumps and electricity. And I turned to Clifford and I said, wow, Clifford, I said, your helpers are saluting you. And he is rather sturdy, he's a big old tall fellow, and turns to me and says, nope, they're saying that we have to work together. Well, I have a lot of gifts, but I'm not a rocket scientist. And this, I was pretty dumb. And I said, this is an honor anybody would die for. And I said, oh, Clifford, I said, thank you so much, but I'm just awfully busy right now. You know? So luckily he didn't listen to me. And he said, no, we're going to work together right now. And so we began doing ceremony, and I take them to all of their sacred sites, and we did ceremony. And at this one very sacred site, he turns to me and he says, your last life, he says, you were Ute. And he says, you feel like you don't belong now? He says, you're very lonely. He says, I'm going to adopt you into the Ute Nation. So he did ceremony and adopted me into the Ute Nation, and he gave me the name Sunaif Mamuch, which means wolf woman in the Ute language. And this is without even knowing about my vision quest. I'd done that many years before. So I'm Sunaif Mamuch to the Ute people. And then when he began working with the World Council of Elders, this is spiritual leaders from indigenous people from around the world, 70 First Nations. And we traveled in North, Central, and South America doing earth healing ceremonies as part of a prophecy fulfillment for 2012, for this huge transition of 2012. Of course, during the course of that work and these long days, 1 meal a day, little sleep, Clifford gave me a new name, Tegupawat, she who talks back, so. But we're still friends and we still work together. I think I'm gonna have big t-shirts with Tegupawat. Man, I think I bet I sell a bunch of them. So we did all of these ceremonies in preparation, years and years of ceremony to heal the earth and heal. In Indigenous way, in Lakota way, we see that there are many sacred hoops. There's a sacred hoop of the self. There's a sacred hoop of all creation. There's a sacred hoop of community, of family. Well, in the sacred hoop of earth, that sacred hoop, Mother Earth gives her flesh for the grasses, and the grasses give their flesh for the four-leggeds, and the four-leggeds give their flesh for the two-leggeds. Well, right now the hoop is broken because it stops there. There's very few people that are awake like as you are, they're aware, that give back to Mother Earth and try to heal her. And that is what the prophecies for these times are. That hoop is going to be healed, that sacred hoop. And this is a prophecy that's common to all the indigenous peoples around the world, have the same prophecy. And what's fascinating about that prophecy is that Pikes Peak holds that transformative energy that's going to make this prophecy manifest, that's going to help it to manifest. So as Richard was saying, we live in a very special place, a lot of special things being done here. And it's because we have that energy there. One of the things also that a lot of people don't know, you've probably all heard of Black Elk Speaks, the very famous book by John Neihardt. And I think it was the libraries voted as one of the most important books from the last century. Well, Neihardt, in that book, when Black Elk is carried off by the spirits to the high mountain where he has his vision, that mountain he was carried to was Pikes Peak. Now, for some reason, Neihardt changed that to Harney Peak. But it's not. When you go to the original transcripts and read them, he says over and over again, it was Pikes Peak. And that's an important distinction because of what all of these prophecies are saying about Pikes Peak having this powerful energy for these times. Black Elk saw that in this generation, this fourth ascent, as he called it, that sacred hoop would be healed, that all people would live as one nation, and that we would all be able to speak to the animals, to the trees, to the stars, to the earth, to the stone people. This communication, this is the energy level that humans are evolving to. It's such an exciting time. And as part of this Red Road, and part of my work with Clifford, we have bought, through the Historical Society, we have an endowment fund, and we bring the Ute Indians back to this sacred mountain for a week every year. And in fact, Richard helped us provide meals one of the years when they bought back. Catamount Institute has been our partner in this for 14 years. Catamount Institute provides the housing when we bring the Ute people back. And it's so important for them to come back to this mountain and to nurture its spirit. All things have spirit. All things are sentient. Great spirits everywhere and within all things. And it's so important to nurture that spirit. I tell people it's sort of like my horses. You know, if I go out to the pasture and I just ignore my horses, they're going to ignore me. But if I go out to the pasture and I carry horse treats and I give them a horse treat whenever I come out, they're going to come whenever I call them. They're going to look forward to me coming out, and they're going to come to me. So that's what our ceremonies do for Mother Earth. That's what our ceremonies are doing for Pikes Peak. That's why it's so important to have this partnerships with Catamount, with the Friends of the Fossil Beds, and through Pikes Peak Historical Society. And this year, because of the construction at Catamount, we had to move the housing to John Wesley Ranch there at Divide, which is a Methodist camp, and they couldn't be more gracious. So it's such an exciting time that we're living in. And we're going to see this transformation. It's all about energy. Everything is energy. And it's such an honor to be here with all of you and with these special speakers that we have. We have Julie, who is one of the instigating people for helping us to make this happen, to bring the Ute people back. Putting together Catamount and making Catamount work. And we have Tracy, who works with the children, is one of the most brilliant teachers. And remember, in Black Elk's vision, he saw the children are going to lead the way for this healing of the sacred hoop. So the work that you're doing is vitally important. And we have Carol, who with her work with CUSP is actively working to heal Mother Earth. So that's my story of my journey on the Red Road, and I thank you for letting me share that with you. And I thank Sharon so much.